So the vision for this, right, and we started this long ago, and 4 times before COVID. We started this as kind of like a continuing cannabis basics course, right? There still are a lot of people in the Nevada market who come into our industries and say, you know, how much of this joint should I smoke, right? Like questions that are at such a basic level that we figured it was useful to open up some kind of free, education event for anybody to come in and give us basics down. Or to have a place where people, who don't want to have a face-to-face conversation with patient advisors on the floor, don't want to take up so much of their sales time or whatever, can come in and kind of get that education itch scratched and then stay, after and ask questions. So everybody's welcome to stay after. I'll hang out until there's no more questions left to answer. I usually lecture for about 45 minutes or so and kind of open it up to everybody else. So I really just want to say thank you to everybody for showing up. This is a pretty meaningful thing for me. There's everybody who's in cannabis has kind of cannabis journey, and anybody who's been in the industry a while has seen things go from like really crazy Wild West style to lots of corporate structure and all kinds of other stuff. This being able to educate people about something that is kind of a newer passion in my life, something I didn't find until I actually got this industry, has kept me positive through a whole lot of stuff, and it keeps me in this industry. It keeps me coming back to you guys. So I just want to say thanks for showing up. I see new faces and not so new faces, but we'll get started there. I don't have to be all emotional. It's not my strong suit. I'm better with the information part. So just kind of an overview about what we're going to go over here. I'm going to talk a little bit, give you some vocabulary just about the plant. I think a lot of what I do, I'm the I don't know what my actual title is. I'm the training and education coordinator, training and development coordinator. Most of what I do is figuring out how to get our floor advisors good face-to-face conversation material, right? Like how can they pull from you guys how you want to feel, right? We talk a lot about open-ended questions. We talk a lot about how cannabis makes you feel, using a lot of descriptive language. I love all that. But I think there's a component for everybody else too, right? Like if the people that we're trying to help aren't asking the wrong questions, or if the only thing you know to say is to walk into the store and go, I want some shit that's fire, right? You're not necessarily going to get the thing that will fix your problem. And that's the CEO of our company talks about how we change people's lives, right? We save people with our medicine that we're selling, and we can't save you properly if you don't ask for help in the right ways. So classes like this are kind of designed to help you in that way as well. Talk a little bit about vocabulary, parts of the plant. We're going to go over some very, very basics of genetics and like why we grow cannabis the way we do. And then I'm very, very fortunate to have all of our cultivation team here in the audience who know a whole lot more about this stuff than I do. So if I start to get a little nervous, that's because I'm teaching, to the people who should be teaching me. So bear with me there. I'm going to hand the sale over. I'm going to hand the presentation over them for a second. We'll talk a little bit about how to grow and how to cure, what the passion is in this industry. I want to talk a little bit about testing and like how the people in our industry who grow our stuff feel about the level of testing that Nevada demands from our stuff. Just because I think it's interesting. Full disclosure, I didn't warn them that I was going to give that like question and answer portion, so they're going to be like going without a safety net there. And then lastly, we're just going to talk about how to shop next door. When you go next door, I hope you all go next door. I'm going to give everybody a 5% coupon. I hope you go next door and use some of this information. Ask some of those right questions, or look at that button and say, this is the one that I want, and feel confident that's going to feel the way you want to feel. So we're going to talk about picking by. We just got the ability to pick out by smell again, only at one of our dispensaries. Is that true so far? Hopefully that cascades to more. If you guys remember shopping before COVID, I never picked up a little jar and smelled it and thought this is going to be amazing, and then be disappointed. In fact, when we used the package on site, there were a few strains you could undo that big old like glass jar of colas in the back, and it would fill the entire dispensary with that smell. And you knew they're getting that L'Orange ready. I'm gonna go make the L'Orange. It's gonna be super fresh right off the shelf. So we'll talk a little bit about how the smell matters, and then also brands. I'm gonna use that portion to be a little bit of a commercial for one of our brands because it's got like a little place in my heart right now. But I'm also just gonna talk about relying on trusting your growers rather than necessarily just looking for high THC numbers, just looking for whatever. Once you find a brand that kind of, does it for you, stay with those brands, despite the testing numbers, despite the other stuff that you're seeing. I think that sometimes pays off. So we'll look at some of the more reliable brands that I talk about. Any questions before we jump in? So let's start with the external parts of the plant. To the basis of the basics, right? Plants come from seeds. Is that new information, anybody? Good. Okay, plants come from seeds. We pop those seeds. I'm not going to get into like all the what we do as far as like choosing what we what we're going to grow and everything. I don't know what's proprietary and what's not. I also have all the growing experts here, so I'll let them that part. Come on, bud. So yeah, plants come from seeds. Those seeds produce roots, right? The roots. Do we have any utility for those roots? Think those roots. Do you think that we're collecting those roots and juicing them for anything? We could. Right? We probably don't because it's actually so easy to get CBD, reliably sourced CBD from anywhere. Hey, come on in, bud. How are you? Good. All right, so the roots are chock full of some good stuff. There's lots of CBD in the roots. There should be some CBG hanging on those roots too. We can get those isolated compounds from outside state from people who are just growing hemp. It's really easy to get our hands on stuff. I think it would be hard for us to harvest our own, collect our own. But that it's a possibility in the cannabis world. Cannabis has so many useful properties across so many different parts of the plant that you could kind of turn into, I don't know, using all parts of the plant. I don't have the adjective for that. The stalks, anything good there? Anybody know how to use the stem parts of cannabis for? It's fibrous, right? We can use it for things like rope. I'll sell rope. Nobody needs that. Although one time, I think somebody was smoking weed behind the desert lot by our house, and my mom said, "That smells like burning rope," and that stuck with me like ever since I was a kid. And I didn't really connect it until I got into the cannabis industry, and I was like, "Oh, that's the shitty weed smell." Somebody smoking something that wasn't that great. So then we get to the leaves. Leaves are a little bit more fun. The leaves, when they are kind of down lower in the plant, more mature plant, going to have these big fan leaves there for catching sunshine. But as you get those leaves closer to the colas and the high THC producing plants, the leaves are also going to have sugary coating on the outside. There's a vocabulary word I can throw out there. Who knows what a trichome is? What's a trichome?
It's the loveliness.
It's the loveliness. That would be the best answer I've ever gotten.
That is.
Trichome. Anybody else? That's accurate. I was just going to give you a little hint there. So it's just THC and the terpenes that push the outside plant, right? Why does the plant do this? Well, plants are all about reproducing, right? Plants are all about looking up, but there's no such thing as plant Tinder, right? So you can't like swipe on the plant that you want to go make little plant babies. So instead, you just have to advertise. You just have to say, hey, this is all my good genetic information that I'm putting out into the universe. That manifests as a THC smell, all those terpenes that bind together to give you, some of those strains smell like alpine forest, some of those strains smell like straight lemons and sugar. That differentiation is what the plant is advertising. Like, this is the genetics that I'm working with right here. Anything that's going to pollinate, become pollinated. So that's why you get that crystallization on the outside of the leaves. That's just those trichomes we're looking for. In our business, we tend to hash that kind of stuff instead of putting pre-rolls. So if you go get a camp pre-roll, you're not getting our shade, you're not getting our sugar leaf. Instead, we take that, throw it in the ice bath with all the other stuff that we, if you guys were here last time, the hashing one. Who's here last time for the hashing one? Yeah, very few of you, right? I know. So we can take those leaves, we can throw them in all their hashing material, we cut the trichomes off, and we can make all kinds of good stuff out of it. That isn't going to taste like your leafing material. But really, the super stuff plant, right, especially in this recreational market, are those colas, right? The flowers that are up at the top side, or top of the plant. In fact, when we're talking about cannabis over there in the store, if we're talking about an eighth that you're going to buy, we're calling it flower, right? That's the section, that's the display, it's the flower section. That's where all the good stuff is. That's the sweetness, right? Because it's not just the THC and terpenes that affect what that plant's going to give you. We're going to talk a lot about, in this one specifically, the entourage effect. Maybe we should establish that term early. And you know what the entourage effect is? Entourage effect is wizardry. It's kind of weird sorcery that we believe in the cannabis world, where we think that all the parts of the plant combine together to give you a better high than any one of those ingredients alone. We talked about it last time. I made an analogy with a sugar cookie, right? I give you just a handful of sugar, right? And I'm like, well, that's the important part of sugar cookie, right? No, it's not the important part of the sugar cookie. Nobody wants a handful of sugar. This guy's not going to be able to do anything with it, right? When I'm talking about sugar cookie, we want all those ingredients baked in together to give us the best possible for that product. Cannabis does the same thing. All those minor terpenes, all those minor cannabinoids, stuff that we don't even really know that we're looking for, they matter on a micro scale, right? And that micro scale like cascades up to the overall effect of the high. So that entourage effect, as I'm going to say several times over the night, is just that overall effect that we get from all the different parts of the plant when we put it into our systems. All right. As far as flower, we usually say flower when we're talking about in-house over there. If I try to initiate a sale with one of you guys, or ladies, we're going to use that word cannabis for most of the time. Anybody know why we do that? CCB has that's the only reason. But you do hear that word weed a bunch, right? We don't want to say the word weed for a couple of reasons. One, the CCB says it's not a very professional term. Two, it doesn't sound very high-end, right? Like, no one wants to, well, I don't want to smoke weed, right? But we don't want to, when we think about that word, but that's one of the things where marketing kind of starts to matter in the cannabis world, right? Like, the word weed is a good blank term for all this stuff, but somebody who's, I don't know, smoking really bougie flower isn't probably thinking about it as a weed that grows anywhere. And I want to say that the term weed is honestly kind of disrespectful to the guys who are, and ladies who are growing our stuff too. It is a weed. It'll grow anywhere. If I take a handful of seeds, I can put it somewhere, I'm going to get some kind of plant. And in order to grow the plant that we want to smoke, it takes a lot of care, a lot of attention. There's a lot of detail that goes into it. So just referring it to offhand as a weed, it doesn't capture the essence of what that plant is. It gets you the hardness of it, which is a good thing to have, because that's an important part of what cannabis does. I kind of just brushed off that idea that it's a very vigorous plant and it's got some utility to it. But if it wasn't such a useful plant, then we probably wouldn't have been carrying it from like place to place when we were just like early men, just after caveman time, dragging our stuff from early man site to early man site. If it wasn't a very useful plant in several ways beyond some medicinal properties, we probably wouldn't be carrying it around with us. So there's part of it too. Lastly, there's that term marijuana. We came from the M&A industry. We came from the medical marijuana, industry. That's what created it. There wouldn't be a recreational market if there wasn't a medical market. So I have a great love for that medical idea of it. I like the term medical marijuana too. I think that's because that's where I imprinted on it. That's just kind of what the term was in my brain. The term marijuana is got some gross history to it. Anybody want to talk a little bit about cannabis history? Anybody want to talk about Anslinger a little bit? I love that his name evokes laughter at this point. Like, we've done our job here, guys. So yeah, Anslinger was hanging out. He was part of several different presidential administrations dating all the way back to the 1920s. He was kind of a racist, super anti-cannabis. When he, so before he got his hands on the picture, right? His hands on the picture isn't a metaphor. But before he decided to start talking about marijuana, that term already existed, and it was applied to a handful of medicinal plants that were hanging out in Mexico and Central America. When Anslinger was trying to get which president in office, he tried to rally white voters using fear, right? Trying to garner some white fear about stuff that was coming up from the border. So he chose that term marijuana not just because it sounded like a non-English word, but because it sounded like Mexican slang. And he was specifically trying to get white voters to be like, oh, there's scary stuff coming up from south of the border out of Mexico. So that's the history behind that word. I think it's a word that we should take back and use on our own, because I think it sounds cooler than a lot of the words we can use for cannabis. And I also think that Harry Anslinger deserves to have the biscuit slapped out of his mouth. Yeah. So that term marijuana, oddly enough, so stuff that was coming up out of the border was from south of the border. It was probably THC and CBD split strains, because it was bringing, migrant workers were bringing up with them. If you're a migrant worker, you're smoking weed at the end of the day, you're probably not trying to get super baked. You're probably smoking something heavy in CBD for an anti-inflammatory effect because your job's held, right? If you do any like historical research, there's not a whole lot available on like weed strains and stuff like that, but you can piece together kind of a picture. Stuff that was high THC that like kids were getting their hands on probably was grown right there in the United States at that time, or it was coming down from like the northern border. It was coming out of Canada, because they were also having like commercial, not commercial, black market cannabis then. All right, so I think, I forgot the little internal thing. We're talking a little bit about terps and cannabinoids too. Terpenes are going to be just the essential oils of the plant, right? So they go in that same column as like just parts of the plant. Essential oils of the plant, we'll link to those a little bit. And then the term cannabinoids. Anybody know the term cannabinoids? We'll throw that around. Cannabinoids, just molecules we find primarily in cannabis plant. That's it, right? Your brain produces endocannabinoids, which are shaped out like the phytocannabinoids that come from the plant. That's why we love it so much. There's a whole bunch of history there. But as far as cannabinoids, we're just going to use it as the blanket term. Really, we're just talking about THC for this class. So, let's get into some genetics, right? Let's talk first about indica and sativa. You guys want to super embarrassing story. I'm gonna tell you anyway. When I interviewed for not this job, when I interviewed to be a floor advisor over there, when we were going recreational, I had to look up the difference between indica and sativa. That's how little cannabis knowledge I had at that point in my life. Since then, I met people like this guy over here who taught me a lot. Taught me a whole lot about cannabis, and things have changed a bunch. But it's okay. I think it's okay, and of course I think it's okay because I'm the example here. But I think it's okay to have customers that come in and know absolutely nothing. In fact, I prefer when customers know absolutely nothing that they tell they know absolutely nothing, because then we can push their experience. The people who know absolutely nothing and want to pretend like they're awesome are the people who are coming in going like, oh, that says 32% THC. I want that one. Like, okay, maybe you do want that one, but let me tell you, man, if you're inexperienced with this cannabis stuff, like we can put the 11% in your hand, and you're gonna love it just as much. You're gonna love it more than you're loving that 8% guy. So it's nice when people kind of have enough courage to ask those open questions, right? What does this mean? Indica and sativa, the biggest split. I'd also say it's probably one of the most, contentious words in our industry. When people talk about indica and sativa, if you're in the know about like what indica and sativa is, you know what you're talking about. A lot of our customers only know it in the marketing that surrounds the words indica and sativa. And a lot of times that marketing is applied not even to a regular plant, right? But we'll apply those indica and sativa labels to things that are pretty much just split oil in a pen, right? Maybe they have some indica sativa facets left over, maybe they don't. But just like an example of that sugar cookie, if I take out like all the, the butter and all the other goods besides that sugar, I'm left with a product that is less than what I had before. Indica sativa. Anybody want to give a shout out of what does an indica feel like? What does that term indica spark in your brain? Sleepy. Indica. I knew somebody was gonna say indica. That's my favorite one, right? A typical indica is probably gonna make you feel like you are pretty relaxed. They don't make you feel sleepy, right? Sometimes you don't want to make you feel sleepy. Sometimes sitting on the couch is the point of your night. You want to just like watch a movie and giggle. There are indicas that give you that feeling. How about a sativa? What's a sativa supposed to feel like? Red? Red. Oh, okay, yes. Red. Yeah, kind of. Right. So this is a confusing, set of terms. Let's talk about the genetic factors first. Right? Let's talk about how we can actually spot an indica or a sativa if we see it in the wild pre-ground. Indicas are. This is all about where they grew up, right? The amount of evolution that grew into these plants that they were, just going through life before humans started coming around and messing things up. Indicas were probably around the Hindu Kush region, right? High elevation, lots of cold. Because it was a high elevation, lots of cold, you get short, squat, bushy plants. They need to retain that. They need to keep it inside. They also have higher THC numbers generally. That's probably because where they were in the world, they had a high elevation, lots of mountains. It's harder for your smell to travel around if you've got the blocks in place. Whereas sativas are probably going to come from somewhere around Africa, probably equatorial Africa, much hotter. So they're tall and skinny plants. Then they're kind of reaching up instead of trying to like push their boughs together, and so they can vent heat away from them. They all tend to be lower in THC because if you are in a plains region, if you're in a vast dry desert with lots of wind, you can have your smell carry very easily, right? Just from a smaller breeze. So that's where you get your kind of THC differences there. Sativas also tend to take longer to grow and all kinds of other stuff. Another term that gets any questions about indica and sativa? I think maybe I have one more thing about indica and sativa. So what should happen chemically in your brain when you're smoking something that has long indica lineage? It has indica, the terpenes we tend to associate with indicas. It's going to broaden your perception. It's got a neuroexciter effect. THC is a neural exciter. It causes more activity in your brain. So when that more activity is active, your perception doors just kind of spread open. A whole bunch of stuff going on around you, and you're engaged, that you're paying attention to it, but you don't feel like you have to laser focus in on it. Whereas the sativa should be the opposite effect. Instead of broadening up horizon perspective, it should narrow down. So you want to get a lot of attention to one thing individually rather than spread out that attention among several things. If you think about, I don't know how many of you guys play video games, but I can smoke good sativa and jump into a first-person shooter video game and be super accurate darting all around the place. I got a lot going on in my brain, and I can kind of focus in a more useful way. If forget about smoking indica. If I'm not smoking a sativa, I jump into a first-person shooter. I'm usually completely useless. I'm 30-some years old. I'm getting killed by 8-year-olds. It's not great. But then I can performance drug like a sativa, and then I can focus right in. If you haven't figured out, I absolutely love the industry. That's all it's because. So other term that we get thrown around all the time are old school and land-raised strains, right? How come everybody's not growing old school land-raised strains? Sometimes people say, well, you can get your hands on the genetics. Well, you can't get your hands on any genetics. They're all secret and they're all like not supposed to be crossing state lines, right? There should be some way for us to get these old school strains. I have a secret pet theory about why we don't have a whole lot of these old school land-raised strains. We used to carry, and maybe you guys can tell me how accurate this was. Do you remember the Acapulco Gold we used to carry? 1 THC CBD split. The last remembrance of it that I had, I think, was about 10% on both. Is that about what Acapulco Gold would have been, old school style? Yep. Probably high THC. Who's smoking that? Who's smoking the 1-to-1 split right now? Nobody is, and that's why we don't have these old school land-raised strains. The old school land-raised strains are cool and they're great. They have a lot going on. They're almost always lower in THC, and that's because they have a lot of other stuff going on. When you get a hemp plants produce a whole bunch of CBD, and that's because you've bred the THC out of it. It's still a plant. It's still going to develop in it. It's going to develop. So to make up all that stuff that it's lost by taking the THC, the ability to produce high THC numbers out, it makes up that weight by producing high CBD numbers, right? That tells me that the plants probably all have some kind of equilibrium inside of them. Right? They have some kind of balance that they reach, not just with the THC and the normal terpenes. Think about those cannabinoids that go all the way down. There's 100 cannabinoids. I can't list them all. I don't know them all, and I'm a cannabis professional. But I believe that lots of those cannabinoids and lots of the minor terpenes work together to give your high small benefits. And we'll talk about that when we talk about it in your cannabis as well. We keep that kind of floating in your brain. These strains are sought after. Why? If it's not THC numbers that everybody seems so hungry for, why is everybody asking for things like Acapulco Gold and Papolo and other stuff that you hear about from when my dad was smoking weed? The names, right? It's same reason that I went and watched the 4th Matrix movie, because it was called The Matrix movie, right? You want to smoke old school strains because you've heard stories about it and they sound amazing, and that's the effect that you want to reproduce. However, the way the market behaves, it's not acting like it wants those actual highs that it's talking about. It's acting like it wants high THC, like big buzz kind of feelings. Rather than smoking something with a lower THC, focusing on yourself, doing a little bit of meditation, thinking about what your high's like. You guys think Rastafarians are cool? Yeah. I think Rastafarians are super cool. You know what they do when they smoke weed? They sit down and they talk religion, right? Like, they don't get super stoned, baked out of their mind, so they can't do anything or focus on anything. They smoke weed. They have a sit-down session and people talk with each other about meaningful stuff to let that high develop, right? That's what they do. That's a fun way to do it. I thought that was a question, but I know you're just all right, and mention garage effects. We're good on that. All right. So most of what we have going on, because sativas. A lot of times people ask us, if you don't grow more sativas, mostly because they grow so slow. But that's also why we hybridize, right? Everything we grow, or at least most of the stuff that you're going to see in any legal commercial market, is going to be a hybrid of some kind. Why do we hybridize? Because you want those big THC numbers. It's your fault. That's what you're looking for, are those big THC numbers. That's okay. We're also growing for speed, right? We are a business. We want to make money. We want to sell you high THC cannabis. We like to sell high THC cannabis. We're not a bunch of connoisseurs that only have this THC stuff. We also sometimes want to get super baked and fun, but there's lots of options, right? There's lots of paths to that same destination. So hybridize but same reason people make dog breeds, right? And I know this is a confusing metaphor because I usually think about dog breeders as the bad guys in the world, right? Like people who run puddles are probably evil. But when you think about where dogs came from, right? When you think about what dogs are for, we took whatever, wolves that we had domesticated, whatever, that had traits that we desired, right? And we had them together so that we had dogs that had more traits that we desired. That's all hybridization is, right? It doesn't mean that we're doing something disgraceful for the market by growing these hybrids. Some hybrids are amazing. Who likes chem dog? That's a hybrid. It's good. It's one of my favorite strains. So same thing with the dogs, right? Like, we're breeding dogs for these specific purposes. We're doing the same for cannabis for specific purposes. However, I don't have a pure dog. I'm nuts. Somebody asked me what my dog was yesterday. I said, what did I say yesterday? Remember? I said kind of mutant is what I said. But yeah, that's what I was looking for. It was like some kind of hybrid. And you know, she's an amazing dog because when we mix genetics, we let genetics make themselves, we get superior products, right? Racial hybrids, genetic hybrids are superior to purebred things because there's more genetic information in the pool. And nature does crazy stuff. It usually pick right? So if we just let plants kind of do what they're going to do, we'd still have these hybrid strains. We'd have strains that are probably a little bit lower in THC, higher in other weird stuff and whatever else. But they'd still be really good cannabis strains. So please don't have any preconceived notion. The point of giving that whole vocabulary, what is hybridization, what is indica, what is sativa? The point is, don't really pay much attention to those things, right? Figure out the effects that you feel. It may not be the same every day. I have lots of people next door say, I'm an indica smoker. Why are you only an indica smoker? Like, you're limiting yourself. So don't have a loyalty to that indica sativa hybrid split. Don't have any misconceived notions about what hybridizing strains is. Figure out the way you want to feel through cannabis. Go next door and make those people earn their paycheck, right? Say, I want to feel this way, and they do a really, really good job. So I'm super proud of them. That wasn't a dig. That was use them for what their intended purpose is by getting the right high. If you get the right high, you're going to have more fun. You're going to have a better experience than if you just get more high. So that's what we're going for here. Any questions for me right now? I would actually like to hand this over a little bit. Feel like talking? Yeah. Let's go.
Nice to see everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is Jesse. I'm lead cultivator at AMP, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what we look for when we do what you call a pheno plant. So every plant comes from a predecessor. So you got your land-raised strains like your Northern Lights, Optical Gold, other ones like Hindu Kush. Names kind of go everywhere, but what you guys are smoking now be the grandkids of those strains. So as cultivators, what we do is we take those strains and try and look for the best, I guess, I don't want to say attributes to it, but we're looking for everything from smell to the way they grow, size, even mold resistance, PM resistance. Those are all genetics that can be passed on from mothers to daughters. We only deal with pheno plants, which is why I say mothers to daughters. So, in that same thing, in that pheno hunt, since we're mixing two, let's just say in the case Northern Lights and your Optical Gold, every seed that come out of that is going to be slightly different. So if you guys have siblings, it's going to be like almost the exact same thing as your siblings, right? Your parents pass on that DNA, you and your siblings have the exact same DNA, just slight differences, very, very slight differences. So that's where our grower eye comes in. So you come in and look for these very specific things, like, oh, this one doesn't have the smell that we're looking for, or this one smells like gas. This one, they each have their own very specific traits, and that's where we come in to do our job and pick the ones that are doing what we want them to do. In that pheno hunt, the hard part, I think, in that process is trying to treat every plant the exact same. So, in order for us to give you guys this product, we have to treat every plant the exact same in order for them to all be at their full potential. So, when we find a plant that's not necessarily what we need it to be, it's very easy to think like, oh, hey, what did we do wrong in that process? But sometimes it all comes down to genetics. Sometimes it almost comes down to like entropy. If you want a certain gas smell in a plant, you can breed the daughter with the mom itself and cross it. That's what we call a feminized cross. But in those processes, have what we call the duds in that sense. So the plants aren't growing as fast, as vigorous. This one might have PM or mold or different things in that sense, but that's where our grower eye comes in to differentiate those differences and stuff. Do you have any questions on that process, I can go on about this. I just kind of want to narrow it down. If you guys have any questions, I could answer.
I would love to hear some like desirable qualities. Specifically, what do you guys look for? And you also said PM parasite something?
Powdery mildew.
Powdery mildew.
Right. So with this new industry, we have a lot more problems that we've been dealing with. Right? Naturally, we can throw a seed out in the sun and it grows the way it grows. That's how we've been doing it for a long time. But now, with the whole environmental control, all that, it brings issues that weren't necessarily there, or nature was kind of take care of those, which would be your powdery mildew, your molds, your bugs, your everything that nature can kind of attack your plant with. So what we try to do is we shut off nature, we throw lights on, we add humidifiers, we add fans, we try and recreate nature, so we play God in that sense. You know, instead of waiting for the sun to turn to, in the winter time, you know, less sunlight.
I love the disdain of winter time.
Nature. Instead of waiting for it, we have all the control. We just switch a dial, and now the plant thinks it's winter, starts producing terpenes, it starts producing all these things, and that's where we kind of really that's where all the fun happens. And just to go a little more on that question, we look for everything from I like to go based on LTSS, which stands for look, taste, smell, smoke. But for a cultivator, there's more check boxes that we want to also check in, which is mold and mildew resistance, growth, vigor, how they're growing, just the style, if they're growing outwards or if they're growing straight up. That's all things that we look for in our facility to get to the point. But with that LTSS, I think that it's a very big selling point. So first thing first, what I look for is the look. If the plant looks beautiful, like it already got my attention. I'm already gonna grow it again. The smell, the terpenes, that's your next selling point, where you walk up and you smell that plant. It smells like strawberry, vanilla, and you're wow, never smelled the plant like that. That's your next selling point. And we have to wait until it dries. Then the smell, look, taste, smoke. So then the taste, right? You smoke it, and if that smell translates into the smoke, that's a winner. Because I don't know if you guys have come across, but sometimes there's a strain. You'll smell it, and it smells really good. But then you smoke it, it doesn't smoke the same in the taste. That's also part of the process, right? You have to hit all those marks in order for us to get that winning strain. And then the smoke, right? We all want to get high. So at the end of the day, that's what we're doing this for. So if all those match, that's what you see on our shelves. That's everything that we've gone through that whole entire process to get to that point is now on shelves in here, and which is why sometimes we even go through phenos, and let's say, for example, we're doing 100 seed pheno run. A pheno. Okay, so a phenotype would be a
siblings from the same mother.
Yeah, siblings from the same mother. So
a lot of times those are identical, but I would say actually most of the time not, right?
Yeah, so if I pop 100 seeds, I'm going to have 100 different phenos. Every single seed going to come out slightly different.
Its own family.
As its own
branch of the family.
Branch, right. Its own thing. So in there, you kind of want to treat those as sisters, or as brothers and sisters, however you want. Because you might have some male plants come out of that, some female plants. And in that, we want to eliminate all males, so we cultivate only females.
Why do you want to eliminate all males and cultivate only females?
So,
there's a reason.
With the way that the market's going and the high THC numbers, the plants all have to deal with hormones. That's how they produce their flowers, and that's how they produce more roots, more stock, more leaves. It's all hormone based, and those hormones come out of the time in the time of sunlight and the temperature of the air, temperature of water. All that has to do with it all changes something that goes on inside the plant. So that being said, all different phenos are going to come out, and that they're just going to have a very slight difference, and this is where the pheno hunt comes in, right? So if you have, for example, you have a favorite of pussy dough and LA cookie, you can cross those two, 100 seeds. Every single one's going to come out different, but we're going to look for all those specific qualities that look, taste, smell, smoke that we're always looking for. And in that same process, so if you guys were to go in dispensary and you guys see 15 different phenos, La Bamba number 1, La Bamba number 4, La Bamba number 7, those are all the exact same genetics, just light differences. So this one might be cherry vanilla. The next one might be vanilla cherry. I know it kind of sounds like the same thing, but it's very, very slight differences. This is where I like to call cannasieurs, people that are very big on the smells and the taste of cannabis. Those are the people that are very, very picky about those very specific things. If you'll find it, they'll be like, hey, I want La Bamba Pheno number 8. Oh, you guys don't have it? I'm going somewhere. And some of these plants, we only have number 8s because we don't have the name for that plant yet. But after we create that, then we now start naming strains for something that we created in a sense. So if we have something that doesn't have a name on it, we can create our own name and essentially start off our own lineage of plants. And that's the goal here, is to create our own lineage of plants. We just have to find the ones that we want to breed with, if that makes sense.
Ones that knock your socks off. That might. Questions?
What's the benefit of going indoor versus outdoor?
Just the control, the absolute control over. So if you were to go see outside this 100+ degree weather, I would bet that it's just going to burn within the first couple hours. But that just gives us the ability to control the AC, the humidity, the light, the watering, everything in a very consistent solid base. Thank you.
You guys have questions?
What's a light deprivation grow?
So light deprivation grow would be something that's outdoor, but environmental. So it would be your greenhouse, your things like that. And sometimes, like for example, since the plant only grows flowers during the winter, if you want to grow a plant during summer, there's no way, because there's that sunlight, you have that light all day. So what you want to do is cover that. There's these shades that go over the greenhouses, cover them, and that's depriving the light, and that's really deprivation. And it can go both ways. So if you want to also grow in the winter and your sunlight isn't long enough, you supplement lighting in there to get that same time. Just having that full control over the plant. You had a question?
Do you primarily work with seed clones?
So right now we're working with seeds, and what we do is we'll do a pheno hunt of 4 strains. Right? We'll put all those seeds, we'll sex those seeds, the seeds that come out good, we then clone those, and we work from cloning that seed. And that full production comes, then we get the test results back, and then we really figure out which ones are key and which ones are the winners that are dealing with.
Just love that. Yeah. Yeah, everybody give a hand. So we started this on the last round of the last higher education, and I want to keep it going if I can. I think there's a lot more value in having somebody who actually knows what they're talking about come up and talk in front of you guys. I'm just a parrot. Like, I do research and then I read it, but these people have their hands on our flowers every day, like these in the thick of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about cure here. We are running through time, and I don't think Irene wants to jump up here much anyway. I really want to jump up. 5 minutes, and I'll guide you through this. It's really all I want to know about, right? I had a great talk with Irene. We have a new brand called Leaf Peeps, right, which is kind of our adjacent brand. And I was answering a bunch of questions from those people, and they all wanted to know how come they were these kind of dark and marbled colors. The buds just didn't look like anything else that we had on shelves. I started talking to Irene about why, and she just told me basically they're pretty, right? Like, this is what we're breeding them for. They look good, and then she said that it enhances like her high when buds are also beautiful, and that's me into the spiral of like why I'm all about low THC stuff and why I'm about like kind of having this moment with the plant while I smoke it. Tell me what curing does to the table. Like, tell me what curing brings to the table. What is good cure change?
Hello, my name's Irene.
Sorry, I was trying to give her as little spot as possible because I was nervous. But yeah, this is Irene. She is our director of cultivation, and she's super amazing. So, yeah, let's give her
So curing, I've been in the industry for 5+ years, and that's what I did for the most of the part of the time. In doing so, I figured out that, once the plant is fine, there were so many different ways that I got to do, and being able to do it for 5 years, I kind of noticed what stood out most. And it came to smell, or, I worked for feed exotic before, so it's all about presentation. And when you open the jar, that's what my boss wanted. He wanted to, you crack in a jar and it smells amazing. In doing so, I started collecting data, trying to figure out what is the best way to cure, and I read about, some people say you have to take out all the humidity to get on the THC to get real high, or, don't do it too much, cure it in a jar, cure it in a turkey bag. So I tried those different ways and collected the data to where I figured out that bringing out the smell and flower and leaving some of the moisture will get you to where it's perfectly right. So that when you get it into the jar and you crack it open, it still continues to cure just a little bit longer, but you're not getting something that it's overly anymore. You're still getting that freshness, humidity, and based on the data and all the results, that because the Las Vegas gets tested for everything, I've been able to like accumulate, okay, well, these strains do that like this, and we started to see the rises in terpenes, because you're not burning them at this point. You're not just leaving the jar open and letting all the smell out. You have to be attentive to it. From the day it gets cut down to the day, it's a process of about 25 to 40 days, just depending on the strain. So I think focusing a lot in that get you much better results coming out of the other side.
What do you think about? There's one of our vendors pumps their little jars full of CO2 before they seal it, and they tell me that keeps it like fresh.
So we've done that before too, actually, and I've tested it. So absolutely, it does. It can help by just keeping the humidity or the flower fresh.
Is that because just the pressure is inside the container?
I don't know necessarily if it's the pressure.
We don't use CO2.
I was curious.
Nitrogen is better.
Okay.
Because it displaces the oxygen, so it stops the flower from.
Got it. Okay. But is what stops it is the pressure of the nitrogen, the self-contained.
The displacement of the oxygen.
Okay. So it can't oxidize because there's no oxygen. Okay.
Same as your crisps with chips.
Right. Like crisps.
If we keep the rim right.
Really?
Yeah.
Not do anymore.
Anything else to share about curing? Anything that makes it? I think our cure is part of what makes our brand special. I think it's better cured a lot of the stuff that I load up when I just buy recreation. So, anything you want to say about that, or just me tell yours?
No, I mean, that's all I got.
It is 7:40, and I still want to leave a little time at the end for questions. So I'm going to go lightning fast through this. So I want to talk about testing results a little bit. I am continually frustrated with testing numbers, right? And I think I'm going to call out a reason I might be frustrated with some stuff too here, right? You always give us our like moisture, our clean content numbers. Give us like ballpark of like normal strain. 24% milligrams, 24 milligrams per gram of terpenes. But if you pull up the testing information, right, only displaying the top 3 terpenes there, right? If the top terpenes are only 3 milligrams per gram of something, that tells me that there's a whole host of those minor terpenes that are resting at larger numbers than people ever see, right? And when you pull up the full COA, you look at and you see there's linalool in this, right, at 2 milligrams per gram, which is not enough to make it on that visible display that we have over there. And that's a tragedy because some terpenes are feelable at very, very low numbers, and linalool is one of them. And linalool, when you and I were talking about social anxiety killing, how many people do you think smoke weed because it cures their anxiety or because they're looking for something to help with their anxiety? Knowing what's in your medicine is the key there. Knowing where those linalool numbers are is the key. So, talk to your bud tenders, talk to your floor advisors, whatever you call them at the dispensary shop at, talk to them, ask them how the smokes behave, right? Ask them what they got out of this, because you're going to get more information from that human being than you do testing numbers. I know that some of us with anxiety don't really like talking to other human beings, and I sympathize, but whatever. Shoot me an email. We'll figure it out, and we'll do it covertly on the side or something. The other thing I want to talk about when it comes to Nevada and testing is infused flower, right? Infused pre-rolls are objectively impressive. It's hard to get them passed. When you put concentrate with flower in the Nevada market, you have to test that flower at the same testing levels that you test the concentrate you put in it. So, when you're testing a distillation versus something that is not a distillation, the numbers are going to be very different. So you have to grow the cleanest flower in order to get those infused drinks passed regularly. We do it, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so impressed with like our team over here. But anybody else that hasn't come out consistently, people like Cultivation also have good grows. Right? That's another way that you can kind of test who's got clean stuff going on. Look who passes good stuff all the time, right? If you don't see a camp flower on the shelf that you like, look at one of those other ones and try one of those to shop around. Figure out what's good for you, because then when you come back around, you know what you're looking for. If that big little number really hits well, start talking to people about little, whatever else. Shopping, I put old days up there, right? What old days am I talking about? Guys, I never bought cannabis on the traditional market. I know that pretty much everybody else in the industry has, right? But I've heard stories about like going to a dude and looking in his trunk and being like, I'll take that. That's the only thing that's available, right? So if nothing else, right, we have better selection than we did once upon a time. So when I say old days of shopping, what I'm talking about right now is when I started in the industry about 5 or 6 years ago. When we started there, honestly, the primary way people would pick out flower was whether or not it smelled good, right? We can talk about how the flower looks, we can talk about the color. I think the only color that people actually come and search for is probably purple. People want purple stuff all the time. Purple stuff, I like it has different taste. And what's anthocyanin, the stuff that makes purple. Yeah. It must have its own taste profile. It must have its own flavor. Everything that's that purpley tastes different. And usually comes with a super calming effect, but who knows what that's all about. I'm assuming it's the actual compound. So, color, yeah, right? Color we can look at, we can kind of figure out if it's going to behave the way that we're anticipating. And unless we really have a grower's eye, like you're talking about, we're probably not going to get all the information we need. Being able to look and see how crisply it is on the outside, real useful if you're looking for high THC strains, if you're looking for something that's going to give you a lot of keep something else. There's a little bit we can tell just by looking at bud. But I think that being able to smell it is a whole other thing. Your body knows what it wants by smell. That's a weird thing your brain will do whether you like to or not. When you go and smell a cannabis strain, and that cannabis strain says, this smells amazing. When it sets off little fireworks in your brain, you're going to like that smoke. Whatever that does, whatever gets through your blood-brain barrier is going to be something that your body was kind of looking forward to on a subconscious level. That may not be the case if you're a brand new smoker, right? You still know some smell good, some smell bad. But when I smell a strain, I know if it smells familiar, if it smells like something I know I loved in the past, my brain saves that information, and I know what that's going to be like. I can anticipate the effects by the smell of a flower a lot better than I can detect the effects by just looking at those top 3 terpenes that are available. Because I'm not a dog or a bloodhound or anything, but our noses are more potent or more sensitive than we give them credit for. Your brain can take apart that terpene profile in a different way all on its own just by smelling it. Because your brain will understand what some of those different terpenes smell like. Even if you know what the names of those terpenes are, even if you don't have that catalog of terpene effects in your brain because you're not fluorify every single day, your brain still remembers some of the stuff that gave it pleasure. Your brain's a little pleasure monster, so it saves a lot of information. When you smell that same strain later on, it remembers, oh, this is the stuff that made me feel good last time, and it gives you a positive response. Talking about the, I shop in a dispensary, talking about old school shopping. Dispensary gives us a little bit of safety, I think, not just the fact that we're not getting arrested for buying weed. I specifically mean safety what we're putting in our body, right? It is safer, I think, to smoke something that's been tested by an independent third party so that you know what else is going in your body. That might just be, a hippy-dippy, whatever thing. Let's look a little bit at that display information. Here's what you can actually tell by looking at the strains that are on the shelf. Sorry, I'm going fast because I don't want to go too much on time. All right. Looking at what we see actually on the strain card here. It's going to tell you what that strain is. I use Granddaddy Purple as kind of my, just test it right there. Under that, it should tell you whether or not strains an indica or a sativa. Should we be really looking at that? Probably not, right? Like maybe if we're willing to trust the marketing from the brand, maybe. But I think that sometimes we should just kind of skip over that and start looking for strains that we know, growers that we like, terpene that we're seeking out. Lineage, I think, matters too. If you decide to be a strainer, right? Purple Urkel and Big Bud are going to be two kind of iconic effects. You're going to get that big purpley strain, that purpley flavor from Purple Urkel. Big Bud's usually high THC, usually it's going to feel head in the body. I think sometimes it has a lot of myrcene too. So being able, if you know the kind of stuff you like, looking at the lineage we lay on the card might give you a hint as to what you're going to get out of the experience. Also, if you see on that lineage one of those old school landrace strains that you're thinking about hunting down for your entire life but never seen, that's an easier way to experiment with their effects, is to find stuff that, like you said, is the grandchildren of those strains and see what we can get out of those. THC percentage, not that you should be paying attention to THC percentage, just know your tolerance, right? Know how much THC you need to feel the way that you're going to feel. If you don't want to smoke, if you got a huge tolerance and you don't want to smoke a whole bunch, go with our THC strain. If you want to go through some of this stuff, the high terpene numbers, if you want to experiment a little bit and treat yourself, get the stuff that you haven't had before because you're afraid of low THC percentage. You're still going to high, I promise. I spent all weekend dabbing, concentrates, spiking my tolerance like crazy, and then I smoked some leaf peace on Monday, did a little product review, and it was great. It was like 16%. It wasn't like super low, but it was a really good high, and even with my freshly spiked tolerance, I was still able to feel it just fine. So put a little effort in. You'll like it. Terpenes, I'm going to go into that because I think I hit kind of information that I wanted to hit before. You're not seeing all the terpene information that's available. Printing out COAs is kind of a pain, but we'll do it for you. Right? If you've got a specific terpene that you're looking for, if you've got a request, come and talk to us. This is our job. We're happy to help you. We want to give you a good customer service experience. It's an experience, not an experiment. And I was going to make a joke until I get to leave a review on Google, but then I feel like I just deleted it. So, the last thing I want to talk about, I think we're maybe just out of time. Choose by your grower. That's always I tell people to choose their cannabis, right? Find the growers that you like, because the growers that you like are doing something right. When it's field exotic, they're doing one thing right over there. When it's camp, they're doing a different thing right over here. When it's green productions, they're doing a whole different thing right out in Pahrump. Figure out the stuff that you like people are doing right? And also give people a chance. That's why I put Flora Vega up there. I don't think anybody had a worse reputation than Flora Vega in the industry a while back, but you know what? Their elusive line is pretty good. It deserves a shot. They've got some strains there that I've not seen in other places that smoke really well. So it is worth branching out, going back and circling back to growers that you forgot about in the past. This industry changes a lot. People are aggressively changing their grow procedures. Give them a little shout out. The last thing I wanted to talk about is Camp and Leaf Peeps, right? Camp is our brand at the source. Leaf Peeps is also our brand at the source. Camp is our brand. Camp is our big brother, right? Camp are like cool guy that's talking around strutting and stuff. Leaf Peeps is a little brother. Came in the same household, still doing all the same stuff, right? The little brother deserves a shot too. If you know people that don't need that 28% THC number, if you got people who want to experiment with being high during the day, not so high that you can't accomplish your tasks, right? Smoking something that's a sativa at 11% can give you a really good effect. We had a lemon tart a few weeks back, maybe a month back. Honestly, one of the best things I've smoked this year, and it was 11%. It tasted incredible. The effect that I got off it was like high, upbeat, and just lit. So you never know what's going to get perfectly. Go out and experiment. I think that's any questions from you guys. Sorry, I had to speed through the last third of that. I just didn't want to cut anybody off. I had good information. Sweet. If there's no questions, then I'm just going to give you guys all 25% off a single item. Anybody want one of those? Let's go. Guys, thank you for coming to Irene